I had a close-knit group of friends that formed in our sophomore year of college. We rented an old apartment near campus and lived together. After graduation, even though we all got jobs and started our own lives, we kept up the habit of meeting regularly. We shared stories about our exhausting workdays, our broken relationships, and our upcoming plans. In the group, there was Mark. He was a year older than us, and everyone knew Mark had feelings for me. I didn't reject him, but I didn't return his affection either. I truly valued him as a person. Everything started changing last fall. Our get-togethers weren't as comfortable as before. Slowly, I realized I was being left out. My messages in the group chat were often ignored. Once, I accidentally saw photos of the whole group having a picnic on a friend's social media page, and no one had mentioned it to me. I called and asked about it, but I only got a flimsy excuse that it was a sudden, unplanned meeting. I kept wondering what had happened and when exactly I had been cut out of that inner circle of friends. Then something terrible happened. One of the guys in our group had a serious car accident on the freeway. He was rushed to the hospital in critical condition, and his face was severely injured, almost unrecognizable. I hurried to the hospital after Mark called to tell me the news, but the friends who had arrived earlier wouldn't let me visit him. I was genuinely shocked by how they treated me. I challenged them, asking why, but they all avoided the question. One of the girls walked up to me and looked at me very coldly. "None of us told you about the accident." "How did he know?" "It was him, wasn't it?" "You need to be careful. He is not simple." I didn't understand what she was implying, but the person she mentioned could only be Mark. Yet Mark had always been kind to everyone. The following months were the darkest time in my life. I lost my entire group of close friends, people I had considered family. My job was stressful, and I was incredibly stressed out. Only Mark stayed by my side, listening and caring for me. One winter evening, Mark came to my apartment and confessed his feelings. "I've always waited for this moment. I regret not telling you before and letting you start relationships with other people. Then you'd break up, only to start a new relationship. I was desperate. But I promised myself I would always be there whenever you needed me most. But now everyone else is gone, and it's time for me to say everything." I cried heavily. Honestly, I didn't love Mark in the way people usually talk about love, but I felt his sincerity, and because of him, I had gotten through the darkest time. So, I agreed to be Mark's girlfriend. We started dating. Mark continued to take care of me attentively. I got used to having him in my life. After almost a year, our lives were stable in a new city, and Mark proposed. I felt happy and lucky to have found such a good man. One afternoon, while I was tidying up Mark's bookshelf to prepare for us to move in together after the wedding, I accidentally knocked over a stack of old files. I bent down to pick them up and saw a blue notebook. Inside were notes in Mark's handwriting. The dates were clearly marked. The names of every friend in the group. Small, trivial stories had been recorded, analyzed, and turned into plans. I shuddered when I read the specific notes, culminating in the line, November 20th. Finally, that jerk knows when to shut up below. That was the detail of my friend's accident. Mark had known my friend's daily driving route. He had made an anonymous call to a truck driver, pretending to be from a logistics company and giving incorrect delivery timing information. He calculated the exact moment the two vehicles would meet on the freeway and indirectly caused an accident that looked random. I sank onto the floor. The room was spinning. So, the entire thing was part of his plan. I was like a puppet in a play, manipulated from start to finish. A little while later, Mark got home. He opened the door and saw me holding the notebook. His face went blank, and his eyes were strangely empty. You don't understand. It was all because I love you too much. They don't deserve to be around you. Only I truly understand you. This isn't love. This is sick. I love you. You aren't going to leave me, are you? We are done. Mark moved closer, but I quickly stood up and rushed toward the door. I grabbed my car keys and ran away without taking anything else. I drove to a coworker's house for help. For all my belongings at the apartment, I hired a cleaning and moving service to transport them to a new place. I wasn't going back there because I was afraid of seeing Mark again. And just as I suspected, he didn't give up. He constantly messaged and called me from strange phone numbers. Pictures of me, taken from a distance, were sent to my personal email. He was openly showing that he was stalking me. I moved, changed my phone number, and deleted all my social media accounts. I sought help at a victim support center and learned self-defense. I hired a lawyer, filed for a restraining order, and sent all the evidence to the police. I was absolutely determined to do everything I could to reclaim my freedom. Mark hasn't been arrested yet, but he can't get close to me anymore. After moments of being strong, I cried and broke down a lot. But after calming down and thinking things over, I felt lucky. I had discovered his true face before it was too late. All this time, I had been manipulated and controlled by what I thought was genuine love. Through my story, I want to advise you all. Before getting married, be absolutely sure you truly know the person you're going to spend your life with. Not just who they are when they love you, but who they are when they are angry, hurt, or don't get what they want. This is a true story. I've been driving a long-haul semi-truck for 20 years, starting when I was 20. Now that I'm 40, I thought I'd seen everything on these highways: accidents, breakdowns, even police chases. But nothing compares to what I witnessed that afternoon on the Nevada desert highway. It was about 5 p.m. and the sun was still blazing hot. This stretch of road is always empty, with only a few trucks scattered around. I was listening to the local radio. Suddenly, in my rear-view mirror, I saw something blazing red appear. The engine noise was a deafening roar, cutting right through the soundproofing of my truck cab. In an instant, a red motorcycle zipped past me, swerved into the left lane, and vanished. All in less than 5 seconds, I sighed and shook my head. This was the typical driving of some kid with a new bike who thought they owned the speed limit. About 10 minutes later, as I started up a gentle slope, I saw the red motorcycle again, parked on the shoulder. The rider was bent over, adjusting something mounted on the front, which looked like a camera. I drove past, but less than 3 minutes later, that roar came up from behind, again, even more frantic this time. The red motorcycle sped past me at a terrifying speed, overtaking me once more before shooting off ahead. I muttered, "What kind of maniac drives like that this late in the day?" Not long after, I saw the road sign ahead, a sharp, high-grade U-turn curve. I lightly tapped the brake, slowing down. These curves are like death traps for large vehicles like mine. Then, in the distance, I saw the red motorcycle appear ahead again. The road curved like a U-shape, hugging the dry, rocky mountainside on the right, while on the left was a steel guardrail and a sheer drop. He was heading toward the curve at an absolutely terrifying speed. My heart seemed to skip a beat when I realized he wasn't leaning into the curve. There was no sign of braking. The motorcycle just barreled straight toward the sharp bend, where the road turned almost 90 degrees. The tires screamed for less than a second. Then came a horrific crash. I slammed on the brakes, and the truck shook violently. I saw the entire scene unfold. The rider flew off the bike, his body soaring through the air before hitting the lower edge of the steel guardrail, the part where the metal beam meets the vertical post close to the road surface. The impact happened with incredible force. The helmet shattered, plastic pieces flying everywhere, mixed with other things. I sat there, gasping for breath, staring at the scene about 30 feet in front of my truck. I immediately opened the door and stepped out. My legs felt weak, and my head was spinning. I took a few steps before I had to stop, kneeling on the side of the road and throwing up. The victim's head and face were not intact. It was mangled and crushed beyond recognition. Blood, bits of tissue, and even an eye, mixed with oil and motorcycle debris, spread across the asphalt nearby. I saw a nearly shattered cell phone, but the screen was still on. It was still recording everything. I turned away, pulled out my own phone, and called 911. The police and ambulance arrived. They sealed off the scene, and the body was covered with a tarp. They said the victim couldn't be identified by sight. They would have to use the vehicle's VIN and fingerprints. I stood there watching them work, feeling hollow. A few days later, the police contacted me. They needed a formal statement to complete the case file. I learned about the victim. He was a 22-year-old guy named Nick. In the backpack found at the scene, alongside a few personal items, was a small notebook meticulously recording his monthly income and expenses. On the last page of the notebook, there was a hastily written sentence. Kayla said, "I'm boring. I'll make her remember me forever." The officer told me that after analyzing the dashcam data and checking the speed via the skid marks, they determined Nick was going up to 120 miles per hour at the moment of impact. By interviewing family and friends, the police also found the motive behind the reckless act. Nick's girlfriend, the girl named Kayla, said Nick was too nice and boring. She wanted to see him be stronger, more daring. Nick couldn't accept that he wanted to prove that he wasn't as ordinary as she thought. He pooled together months of hard-earned savings to buy the sport bike, then planned to film a truly impressive high-speed video to send to his girlfriend. I didn't know Nick. I never even saw his face clearly when he was alive, but in the days that followed, I couldn't stop thinking about him. A young man with his whole future ahead of him, and it all ended because of a single, split-second bad decision. Nick thought he needed to be strong to be approved by others. He believed that speed and danger would prove his self-worth. But reality showed the opposite. Life is too fragile to gamble on risky moments. Never live to prove yourself to others. Don't let someone else's words define your life's value. And most importantly, never bet your life on impulsive moments just to get approval. I still drive my truck, still run those long routes. Every time I pass that spot, I look over at the steel guardrail where the accident happened.
Xavier, can't you just wait a few days for me to sort out my work? Richard, it's all good. I can go alone. It'll be a memorable experience. That night, my wife was all excited, getting her stuff ready to take on Jackson Hole's Snowy Mountains solo. Xavier is all about mountain climbing and skiing in the winter. If her family hadn't stepped in, she'd have gone pro in this sport. Jackson Hole's a ski resort with steep terrain, so it's perfect for pro skiers. That's why my wife was so hyped, like, this is gonna be a whole new milestone for me. That night, when we went to bed, I still turned to Xavier, suddenly feeling anxious, like, you sure about this trip? I'm totally, absolutely sure. Even without me? Xavier laughed. I've been climbing for almost 8 years, Richard. Then she gave me a big hug, like, it's gonna be an awesome experience. Even though I wasn't fully sold on it, I let Xavier go. Forever. That afternoon, the news broke about a huge snowstorm hitting Jackson Hole. I called Xavier right away, but all I heard was nonstop beeping. Xavier, come on, I mumbled, making a bunch of other calls. I called the police, told them about my wife, and begged them to go find her. But the police said they couldn't treat it as a missing person case yet, since it hadn't been long enough without contact. I felt like I was burning up inside. I couldn't sleep at all that night and kept calling Xavier over and over. The next morning, I headed to Jackson Hole to find her. I couldn't wait any longer. Every minute that went by just made me lose hope and feel more desperate. No matter what, I was gonna find Xavier and bring her back. After the blizzard, it was dead quiet, and the thick snow made every step feel extremely heavy and tough. Hi, can you tell me the way up the mountain? I asked the guy looking after the place. He kept a straight face, looked me up and down, and then asked, You here by yourself? Yeah, I'm looking for my wife. Have you seen... I pulled out my phone and opened up a pic of Xavier and showed it to him. Go straight until you hit a sign, then follow... He cut me off without even looking at the phone. I didn't have time to waste. Just bounced out of there. Don't forget the instructions, he said, stressing it again. I turned around to say thanks, but he was already gone. The road up the mountain had a deformed wooden sign with ugly writing on it. Definitely not what you'd expect from a famous tourist spot. The road was tiny, but since it was for pros, I didn't really think twice about it. After walking a bit, my phone totally lost signal. The terrain here was tough, so I had to really work to keep going. I tried to control my breathing to save as much energy as I could. There were no more wooden signs, so I was pretty lost, just looking around. Wait, is that a mannequin? I got closer, and yup, there was something. Maybe a person or some weird humanoid thing leaning against a tree with its arm pointing in one direction. Oh, hello. You climbing the mountain solo too? No answer, so I just kept walking faster. The closer I got, the weirder my heart started racing. It was a guy, so I said hey again, but still no response. Need any help? I asked, sitting down next to him. The guy had his eyes closed. His skin was all purple, and there was a weird smell starting to spread. My mouth was dry, so I tried to swallow, my hand shaking as I reached out to him. I instantly fell back, just mumbling in fear. He wasn't breathing anymore, and that smell was... I pulled out my phone to call the police, but no signal. I turned to run down the mountain, but then I remembered Xavier. If this guy was another climber, then where the hell is my wife? It's like I had an extra engine or something. I took off running in the direction the guy pointed, trying to find Xavier. The further I went into the mountain, the more dead bodies I found. They were all pointing the same way, like sets of signs from corpses. The temp dropped fast. I was freaking out, searching everywhere for Xavier. And then I found her. My wife was one of those signs. Xavier, can you hear me? Her body was stiff and cold, eyes wide open, just lifeless. She was just sitting there, pointing in one direction too. I hugged Xavier's body tight, hoping my warmth would somehow wake her up. I buried my face in her cold body and just cried. I should have been more set on it. Should have gone with her instead of staying behind to deal with work. Then there wouldn't be any should-haves. Suddenly, I heard something. It was the manager from earlier, dragging a woman. I just watched, quiet as hell. He dropped the girl, then set her up like the other bodies, pointing in the same way. Then he gave this smug smile and took off with the girl's backpack. I wonder where that guy's frozen, he muttered, looking around like he was searching for me. I'm right here, you bastard! In that moment, all I felt was pure rage. In front of me was a murderer with no weapon, and my wife, along with a bunch of other innocent people, were all dead because of him. I put all my strength into my arm and threw a solid punch at him. I didn't give him a chance to react. I just kept hitting the weak spots with the log. By the time the white snow was covered in red and there was a broken body at my feet, my mind snapped back to reality. A bit freaked out, just a little, I went back to Xavier, hugged her tight, and jotted down these diary entries. Come back. Don't go this way. I wrote a red message on a white scarf from a body and tied it to a tree branch. Sitting next to Xavier, I could feel every cell in my body slowly freezing. I found her, and I'm staying by her side forever.
I'm Jim. I was 14 years old at the time. My family lives in Utah in a large house. I have an older brother named Julian, 19 years old. We are not close. Julian is a very cold and even sometimes grumpy. I tried to break the ice for many times, but he ignored me. My childhood did not include Julian's companionship, but I'm used to it anyway. My room and Julian's are on the second floor, separated by the stairs leading down to the living room. Julian is a Casanova. I can't remember how old he was when he brought home his first girlfriend, and I can't remember exactly how many girlfriends he had. My parents also talked to Julian many times that they did not want so many strangers coming in and out of the house, but he chose to ignore it and even got angry with his parents. Gradually, his parents didn't care much about Julian anymore. He was free to do what he wanted. For quite a long time, Julian loved a girl named Ella. She was very beautiful, with long brown hair, blue eyes, and a soft voice. Ella was also brought home by Julian like previous girlfriends. Unlike them, my parents really liked Ella. She gradually became close and participated in every event of my family. At that time, Ella almost lived at my house. Suddenly, one day, my family didn't see Ella anymore. When his parents asked, Julian replied that he broke up with her, but he didn't say why. Although my parents and I were not happy with that, we couldn't change Julian's decision. After that, he didn't bring any girlfriends home anymore. He constantly locked himself in his room. On a Saturday night, my friends went to a friend's birthday party. Julian went camping overnight with his college friends, and I stayed home alone. I locked the door carefully and checked all the windows. After making sure I was safe, I went up to the room to play games and eat snacks. After a while, my game console had problems. I remember Julian had a very modern game console. I tried to borrow it many times, but he definitely refused. This was my chance to experience it. I immediately ran to Julian's room. Great when he forgot to lock the door. I looked for the game console. But I started to feel uneasy. There was a very unpleasant smell in Julian's room. I couldn't describe it, but it definitely wasn't the smell of garbage or food. Ignoring it, I continued looking for the game console because my friend was waiting. I looked on Julian's bookshelf, but suddenly the door slammed shut, startling me. There was no wind outside. I had closed all the windows. At this point, I started to get scared, but I tried to calm myself. Finding a game console on a bookshelf makes me excited and relieves my fear. I quickly walked towards the door. Suddenly, there was a sound of gurgling water in the bathroom. I don't understand why my heart was beating so fast at that time. Julian probably didn't turn off the faucet carefully. I tried to calm down with that thought. This time the stench was stronger and more terrible, making me stop and feel nauseous. I walked towards the bathroom, slowly looked inside. The hand-washing faucet was not locked tightly. I breathed a sigh of relief and went to turn on the faucet. The stench filled the small space of the bathroom and forced me to hold my breath. Julian's bathroom floor is quite rickety, the tiles rattling against each other. Why didn't he tell his parents to fix it? I muttered. Just as I turned around to leave, I stepped on a brick, broke it, and sank deep beneath to cover my feet. I felt something liquidy and mushy under my feet. About 1 meter from where I stood, a tile on the floor bounced up. From below, a head of a person with a rotten and decomposed face appeared, long hair hanging around the face. I can't describe my feelings at that time. I was scared, panicked. My body was stiff, but when I moved, it was limp. I screamed with all my strength, ran a few steps and then fell down, trying to crawl back to my room. The distance between the two rooms is about 5 meters, but I feel it is very long. I called my parents in a muffled voice that was light in my throat, then called the police. I stood in front of the house and waited until the police and my parents returned. The first thing my parents did was call Julian, asking him to come home immediately. That whole night, my parents and I stayed up waiting for Julian to come home. The next morning, he returned and confessed everything. The body on the floor is Ella. Julian discovered Ella was meeting with another guy. Unable to control his anger, Julian strangled Ella to death and hid her body under the bathroom floor. Julian was sentenced to life in prison. My mother was hospitalized for 4 months because of that shock. My parents converted Julian's room into a storage room and paid more attention to me.
The clock on the dashboard read 2:17 a.m. It had been over 12 hours since I left Colorado, and still about 3 hours left before getting home to California. The week-long sales trip had left me exhausted, but I pushed myself to drive home instead of staying another night in a hotel. Sharon, my wife, and the kids were waiting. It had been 3 months since the company moved me to the traveling sales division. My time with my wife and kids was almost zero. My eyes drooped with fatigue. The radio played worn-out country songs I had heard hundreds of times on trips like this. I adjusted the window, letting the freezing autumn night air awaken my numb senses. In the car's headlights, the road stretched endlessly ahead, as if I were driving into a boundless tunnel. It was right then that I saw him. At first, it was just a faint, dark shape on the roadside, easily missed if I hadn't happened to glance to the right. A man, standing with his thumbs stuck out. Something about the man's posture, maybe the exhaustion evident in his slumped figure, made me hit the brakes. My old sedan slowly came to a stop, and I rolled down the passenger side window. "Where are you headed?" I asked, trying to make out his face in the dark. "Eastbound. Anywhere along the way is fine." His voice was strangely soft. I hesitated for a second. Even though I'd decided to stop, there was still a feeling of unease. But now, changing my mind and driving off would seem rude. "I'm heading to Cali. If you want to go that way, get in." The man got into the car, bringing with him a strange, indescribable smell. As he sat down, I noticed his clothes looked strangely clean, not like someone who had just been standing on the roadside in the middle of the night. "Thanks for stopping. Not many people do anymore. Especially at this hour," he said as I started driving again. "No problem." "I'm Mark," I replied, trying to shake off the uncomfortable feeling. "David," he said after a pause so long I thought he wouldn't answer. We drove in silence for a while. The radio played a sad Johnny Cash song about a man who lost everything. I glanced at David. In the dim light from the dashboard, I could see he was younger than I thought, early 30s maybe. His dark hair and dark eyes contrasted sharply with his pale skin. "So where are you headed?" I asked, trying to break the heavy silence. "I'm not sure anymore. I've been traveling for a while now. It seems I can't find my way home." "Are you lost?" "You could say that." He turned towards me and his gaze made me shiver. "Do you ever feel like you're stuck, Mark? Like you're trapped in a single moment, and no matter how hard you try, you can't get out?" The question caught me off guard. "I'm not sure what you mean." "I'm dead, Mark. I died and I can't move on," David said, his voice terrifyingly calm. My heart beat faster. I tried to laugh, but it sounded more like a wheeze. "You're alive. Death isn't what people imagine. It's not an end. It's just a prolonged moment. And I'm stuck in my moment," he continued. I gripped the steering wheel tighter, feeling my palms start to sweat. "How do you need help?" I asked cautiously, silently calculating the distance to the next town where I could find a way out of this situation. David looked out the window for a long time before answering. "I don't know." I shifted in my seat, feeling uncomfortable. The car's heater was running full blast, but I still felt cold. "You know, I used to be a salesman. Like you," David suddenly said. I flinched. "How did you know I'm a salesman?" "The sample case." He pointed to the back seat where my leather briefcase containing product samples lay, and the roll of duct tape in the storage compartment. Classic signs of the trade. "Oh," I exhaled, feeling slightly less tense. At least that was a logical explanation. "Yeah, I sell medical equipment. What did you sell?" "Insurance," he said. "Life insurance, actually. Kind of ironic, isn't it? Selling security to people afraid of death, then in the end, learning about it myself much sooner than planned." "What happened to you, David?" I asked, partly out of curiosity, partly to keep him talking. People usually don't cause trouble when they're talking. "One night, just like this one," he began, his voice lowering. "I was driving home after a long trip, tired, just like you, trying to get home early to see my wife. She was pregnant with our first child. I needed to stay awake, so I rolled down all the windows, cranked up the music. But my eyes were still heavy. Just for a minute, I thought. Just close my eyes for 1 minute." David paused, staring at some invisible point ahead. "That's the moment I'm talking about." My eyelids closed. My car hit the median. Everything ended. My body tensed. His words hit too close to home. How many times had I driven tired like this, my own eyelids heavy, jolting awake when I felt the car drifting? "You shouldn't tell me things like that while I'm driving," I said, trying to keep my voice calm. "So, what happened next?" I couldn't stop myself from asking, even though I wasn't sure I wanted to hear the answer. "Nothing. No light, no welcoming family. Just the feeling of eyelids closing, the car leaving the lane, knowing everything was about to end." I felt sick. Not because of his story, though it was creepy enough, but because of the similarity between our experiences. I too had pushed myself to the limit too often for work, for the desire to get home to Sharon and the kids. "Hey, Mark." David leaned closer, his voice dropping to a whisper. "Do you want to know what death feels like?" Before I could answer, he burst out laughing, a high-pitched cackle that made the hair on my neck stand up. I slammed on the brakes, heart pounding in my chest. The car skidded on the pavement, tires screeching. Without thinking, I threw open the door and scrambled out, nearly tumbling onto the pavement. Behind me, the laughter continued, seeming to chase me through the darkness. And then, from ahead, blinding headlights appeared. A horn blared along with the screech of brakes. I stood there, frozen in the headlights. An ambulance stopped just inches in front of me. Two men in paramedic uniforms jumped out of the ambulance, their faces shocked. They approached me, eyes searching. "What are you doing out here in the middle of the highway at this hour?" There was a man in my car. David. He was saying strange things about death, I stammered, breathing heavily, heart still pounding in my chest. The two men exchanged glances. "You said David? Tall, thin, dark hair, about 30? I nodded. "How did you know?" "His full name is David Mercer, a patient at Riverside Psychiatric Center. He escaped yesterday." My body stiffened. "A psychiatric patient?" When asked about David's location, I turned, pointing back where I had abandoned the sedan, about half a mile away. I got into the ambulance, riding back to the car with the two paramedics. Noticing I was still quite shaken, the paramedic gave me a cup of water and a blanket. According to the paramedic, David could be very unstable. He suffered from severe psychosis, with hallucinations and delusions about death. The paramedic looked sad. "David used to be a long-haul driver like you. 2 years ago, he had a serious accident on this highway. His wife was pregnant, and he was trying to get home early." I felt a chill run through my body. "So that was true? About his wife and child?" "Yes, that's the true part of his story. David suffered irreversible brain damage. When he woke up after a 3-month coma, he developed a strange form of psychosis. He believes he died in the accident. David no longer recognizes his wife and child. He's stuck in the moment before the crash. In his mind, his wife is still pregnant, and he's still trying to get home." The ambulance approached the spot where I had left the sedan. Through the window, I saw my car still parked crookedly on the shoulder, the driver's door wide open. When we stopped next to my car, one of the paramedics checked inside and confirmed no one was there. They helped me restart my car, advising me to stop at the nearest rest stop to rest. I nodded, feeling a deep gratitude when I thought about what could have happened. As I drove away, looking in the rearview mirror, I saw the ambulance turn around and continue their search. I took out my phone, called Sharon to let her know I'd be staying overnight at a rest stop and would be home early the next day. That night, lying in the motel room, staring at the ceiling, I thought about David and his fateful moment. I wondered how many other long-haul drivers had encountered him on that lonely road, and how many of them had been saved by his strange warning. I always prided myself on my survival instincts. My mom often said I inherited the sixth sense from my grandmother, a woman who survived many historical events because of this special ability. But I never truly valued it until that fateful night, at a remote rest stop in Texas. The journey from Toronto to Oklahoma City had taken longer than I expected. Originally, I thought I could complete the trip in 3 days, but a snowstorm in the Midwest forced me to change my route. Instead of heading south through Kansas, I had to reroute westward, crossing part of Texas before reaching Oklahoma. By the third night of the trip, I was exhausted. The clock on my phone read 11 p.m. when I saw the sign for Lone Star Rest Stop, a typical Texas name. Heavy rain slammed against the windshield, reducing my visibility to just a few meters. I decided to stop and rest for a few hours, at least until the rain eased. The rest stop was far from the highway, nestled in a barren area with a few old oak trees. The parking lot for large vehicles was nearly empty, except for an old beige RV parked at the far end. I chose a parking spot right under a light pole, hoping its dim yellow light would give me a sense of security in the dark. I still remember how it felt when I stepped out of the car. The air was humid and heavy, carrying the scent of earth and grass. Even though it was October, the temperature was still fairly warm, a typical Texas feature I wasn't accustomed to. The thin sweater I wore from Canada now felt stifling and uncomfortable. Inside the rest stop, it was eerily quiet. A middle-aged man with a tired face sat behind the counter, his eyes glued to his phone screen. He only glanced up at me once before returning to his digital world. I bought a bottle of water, a protein bar, and a large black coffee, hoping the caffeine would keep me awake enough to drive a few more hours if necessary. As I returned to the parking area, I noticed an elderly couple standing next to the RV. They were struggling to shield themselves with an umbrella in the pouring rain while bringing bags of supplies into the vehicle. I approached them and offered to help. "Oh, thank you, dear. That's very kind of you," the woman said with a southern accent, her gentle smile softening the deep lines on her face. "We're too old to be racing with Texas weather," she added. The husband, with his white hair and neatly trimmed beard, nodded at me. "You're traveling alone, young lady? Not very safe, especially out here in these remote places." A warm feeling mixed with a slight unease crept over me when I heard his words, but I quickly dismissed it. It was the concern of an older person. "I'm on my way to Oklahoma to visit my sister. The storm in the Midwest forced me to take a detour through Texas," I replied, helping them bring the last bag into the RV. "We're headed to Oklahoma too. We could be long-distance neighbors," the woman said, her voice becoming excited. "I'm Martha, and this is my husband Frank," she added. Martha invited me into the RV to get out of the rain and have a cup of hot tea. I had planned to decline, knowing that I shouldn't trust strangers too easily. But there was something about this couple, perhaps Martha's gentle appearance or Frank's sincere eyes, that made me accept the invitation. Inside the RV, it was surprisingly warm and tidy. Family photos were hanging everywhere, mostly pictures of a young boy with a radiant smile in different stages of his life. Martha introduced him as their grandson, and they were on their way to Oklahoma to attend his college graduation. For the next hour, we chatted like old friends. Martha and Frank shared stories about their life in Florida, how they sold their home after retiring to buy the RV, and spend their remaining years traveling across the country. They had visited all 48 contiguous states and were planning a trip to Alaska next summer. When they heard about my work in design, they seemed quite fascinated. As the conversation went on, I began to notice small details that made me uncomfortable. How Frank kept glancing at my phone, which I had left on the table. How Martha occasionally interrupted her husband, as if trying to stop him from talking too much. My instincts were screaming that something wasn't right. "I should get back to my car," I said, standing up abruptly, causing a bit of tea to spill. "Thanks for the chat and the hot tea." "Oh, it's getting late and it's still raining. You can stay here tonight. We can head out together tomorrow morning," Martha said, her tone becoming somewhat urgent. Frank nodded in agreement. "We have a small bed in the back. It's very comfortable." The unease I felt quickly turned into real fear. I looked around the RV, realizing that the exit, the only way out, was behind Frank. I quickly declined again, but they weren't planning on letting me leave. My heart raced. I shouldn't have trusted them, shouldn't have stepped into this RV. I repeated my refusal and moved toward the door, but Frank blocked it, standing still. Martha told her husband to let me go since I had my own schedule, her voice gentle yet carrying an odd tension. A long moment passed, feeling like an eternity, before Frank reluctantly stepped aside. I hurried past him, grabbing my phone and purse. "Thank you for everything," I mumbled, not daring to look them in the eye. "Be careful," Martha called as I opened the door. The rain was still pouring as I ran toward my car. My whole body was trembling, not from the cold, but from the overwhelming fear. I opened the car door, jumped inside, and immediately locked all the doors. Only when I felt safe in the familiar space did I dare glance back at the RV. Frank was standing by the window, watching me. When our eyes met, he slowly raised his hand and waved, a faint smile forming on his aged face. I didn't wait another second. Starting the car, I quickly drove out of the rest stop, ignoring the heavy rain and limited visibility. I drove for about 20 minutes before I found a small, old motel on the side of the road. Its lights and crowded parking lot gave me the sense of safety I desperately needed. In the motel room, I couldn't sleep. I wondered if I was overreacting. Maybe they were just a kind, elderly couple, worried about my safety. The next morning, I woke up after a restless sleep and turned on the TV to check the weather. But instead of the usual cloud coverage and temperatures, I saw the serious face of a local news reporter. An elderly couple was discovered deceased, their bodies found about half a mile from the Lone Star rest stop. According to forensics, they had been murdered approximately 2 days before being found. Police are investigating and stated that this was a targeted killing, as the couple's valuable RV was missing. I froze, unable to believe what I was hearing. The image of the beige RV appeared on the screen, the very vehicle I had been in just hours earlier. The victims have been identified as Frank and Martha Johnson, a retired couple from Florida. According to family members, they were on their way to Oklahoma to attend their grandson's graduation. I slumped onto the bed, my head spinning. With trembling hands, I took out my phone and called the local police. I needed to tell them what I knew. Taking a deep breath, I began to tell my story. 2 months later, the police caught Robert and Lisa Chambers, the couple who had murdered Frank and Martha Johnson, and at least 3 other couples over the past 2 years. Their modus operandi was targeting elderly couples traveling in RVs, killing them, and stealing their vehicles and belongings. Then they used the victims' identities to approach others. I will never forget that fateful night at the Lone Star rest stop, or the unease that saved my life. Now I have no doubt about my sixth sense. As I drove north back to Canada and my safe home, I realized one thing. In a world full of hidden dangers, sometimes fear is not a bad thing. Sometimes it's the most valuable warning bell we have, and I've learned to listen to it. I'm Jackson, 14, living in a small town in the Midwest. My house is smack in the middle of a sparse forest, where oak and maple trees stretch as far as you can see. A week ago, my parents had to go on a business trip and left me home alone to take care of the place. My mom asked our neighbor Kate to check on me the first day, and my Aunt Tabby was supposed to stay over the next day. Like most teenagers, I was pumped to have the place to myself for a whole day, free to do whatever I wanted. But then, the quiet of the house, the eerie stillness of the forest, started creeping in, wrapping around me like a thick, dark curtain. That first night, I lay in bed, the soft yellow glow of my nightlight making the room feel less empty. But the peace didn't last long. There was a knock at the window. At first, I figured it was just the wind, but the tapping kept going, steady and relentless. When I pulled back the curtains, all I saw was darkness, but on the glass, a message appeared in the steam. I am looking at you. As I tried to make sense of what was happening, a piece of paper got shoved under the door. On it, in messy, slanted writing, "Do you want to know the secret of this house? Play my game." I grabbed my phone, my hands shaking, and tried to call my mom, but all I got was no signal. Right then, the lights started flickering like crazy. Then, boom, total blackout. Panic hit me hard. I ran to the front door, yanked at the handle, but it wouldn't move. The latch was locked. From the outside, a voice drifted in from the window.
"I used to live here before you came. This house has secrets your family never knew. I can help you find them, but you have to do what I say."
I was trapped, my own house, and I couldn't get out. In that moment, all the fear of a 14-year-old kid swallowed me whole. I couldn't say no. He slid another piece of paper toward me. "Go to the storage room under the stairs." The basement was a place I almost never went. It was dark, damp, and reeked of mold. With a shaky flashlight in my hand, I felt my way through the old wooden door. In the dim light, I spotted a big metal box buried under a pile of dusty old bottles.
I pried it open and nearly dropped it in horror. Inside were rotting animal remains, cat bones, dog bones, even tufts of rabbit fur. The box reeked of death. My hands were shaking so bad, I let it go.
This is just the beginning.
From the window came a low, chilling voice. Go to the living room and look under the wood floor. I yanked up the old carpet in the living room and found a cracked floorboard. I pried it open. Sitting underneath was a glass jar filled with dried blood and tiny bone fragments. I couldn't tell what kind of animal the bones belonged to, but something in my gut told me they'd been there a long, long time. I picked up the jar, and as my flashlight hit it, my breath caught in my throat. Inside were several shriveled, dried-up human fingers. The fingernails were still there, but the skin had shriveled up into wrinkled, leathery patches. My whole body shook as I stumbled back. Who are you? Why are you doing this? He didn't answer. Instead, his voice drifted through the window, low and icy.
You want the truth? There's one more place. Check the kitchen cabinet under the sink.
I don't know why, but I listened. Fear had shut off every logical thought in my brain. I was just moving, like a puppet on strings. The second I pulled the cabinet door open, a disgusting, stomach-churning stench hit me like a punch to the gut. Among the rotting trash and crumpled plastic sat a black garbage bag, knotted tight. As I peeled it open, the first thing I saw was hair, dark, matted. Then, smaller pieces of bone, and buried deep inside, something that made my breath stop cold. A severed human hand. The skin pale, stiff, frozen in time. I let out a scream and fell backward, but I couldn't tear my eyes away. That hand, it clung to my mind, wrapping around me, pulling me down into a nightmare I couldn't escape. Then he stepped into view, standing outside the window. This time, he wasn't wearing a mask. His face was hollow, his eyes bulging with red veins, like he hadn't slept in years.
Did you see that?
He whispered.
This used to be my house. I lived here when it was abandoned, but then your family came, and he chased me away.
He pointed at the plastic bag.
That's what I left behind. Proof that I was here. The animals I found. The people who tried to make me leave. You have no right to be in this house. It's mine.
Then, out of nowhere, he lunged inside, gripping a massive hammer. I didn't think. I just swung the baseball bat to him. With all my strength, it connected with a sickening crack. Panic had taken over, wiping out every other thought. Eyes shut tight, I just kept swinging, again and again. He finally hit the ground. Still. By the time the police got there, they found everything I told them about. Animal bones, human fingers, and the twisted tools he used to hunt and store his works. The human arm in the kitchen drawer was confirmed by DNA to belong to a guy who'd been missing for years. He used to live near the house and had a rocky history with the stranger. Turns out, he was the one who tried to kick the guy out when he was squatting there as a homeless man. That stranger had been using the house as his hideout for years. He had killed, dismembered, and stashed the remains in different corners of the house, his sick way of marking what he thought was his. The police found out he had a long history of severe mental illness, paranoia, violent outbursts, the whole deal. In his twisted mind, this house was the only place that made him feel safe. Losing it had pushed him over the edge. After everything, I couldn't go back to that house. I can't shake the feeling of being led step by step, like a puppet dancing on the strings of a madman. Every time I close my eyes, I hear his voice. I see that arm. In the end, I realized that real danger doesn't just come from the monsters hiding in the dark. It also comes from broken minds. Society left him behind and shoved him to the edges, and in his loneliness, he built a twisted world of his own. I grew up in this old apartment complex on the south side of Chicago, where the walls were always peeling, and everything smelled like mold. My grandma took care of me from when I was 10, after my parents moved on and started their own lives. We had this tiny third-floor apartment, and we always kept the windows shut to keep the cold out. Back in the day, the complex used to be full of people, but over time, it turned into this rundown place, mostly just families struggling to get by. I never thought it was nice or anything, but at least it was safe and quiet. The basement was like a whole different world. Long hallways, those flickering fluorescent lights, and rusty metal doors no one wanted to mess with. The air down there was thick with mold, cigarette smoke, and this awful stench that made your stomach turn. Sometimes you'd hear whispers behind the doors, like shady deals going down. First time I ever went down there was when I moved in with her. Curiosity turned into this creepy obsession that stuck with me for years. I saw this dark figure with these huge eyes all distorted, and this sound coming from its mouth that made my ears ache. I didn't run. I crawled out of there, too freaked out to even make a sound. Behind me, I could hear this weird knocking, fast and slow, mixed with the screams of that freaky creature. I never went back down to the basement. I just lived with the fear, never told anyone, and somehow figured out how to deal with it. I begged my grandma to get me a radio, and whenever I was home, it was always on and right next to me. At night, I cranked it up loud, letting the stories and songs drown everything out and help me fall asleep. Other than that, life was pretty chill, at least until I turned 15 and the radio broke. I hadn't gotten around to fixing it yet. One night, while I was doing my homework in my room, I heard it, the knocking from the basement. It was steady, 3 beats over and over. I covered my ears, shaken, but I got it. 3 taps, 1 short, 3 quick taps, 1 long, then 3 slow taps. I stopped freaking out and actually listened, my whole body tight with nerves. It was an SOS signal. I remembered it from that last field trip. My heart was pounding so hard I thought I might be imagining it. But then it came again, loud and urgent. I bolted into the kitchen where my grandma was making hot soup. "There's someone in the basement. They're sending an SOS." My voice was shaky as hell. She didn't say a word, just quietly grabbed the phone and called the cops. My grandma never froze up when things got real. 10 minutes later, the flashing lights from a patrol car lit up our living room window. Me and my grandma stood in the hallway, looking down as 2 cops started knocking on every basement door. No one answered. One of them shined a flashlight through the crack of the last door at the end of the row, then gave a signal to the other. They busted the door down. A scream tore through the basement, and one of the cops shouted that they found someone. I froze, gripping my grandma's hand tight. A few moments later, they brought out a girl, maybe just a couple years older than me. She was wrapped in a police blanket, her skin pale, curled up tight, wrists covered in deep marks from being tied up, eyes wide with panic, like a trapped animal. The cops asked her name, but she couldn't really talk, just this broken whisper. After what felt like forever, she finally forced out 2 words, shaky and soft. Emily Carter. The name sent chills down my spine. I'd seen it on a poster at the bus stop down the street. They switched those posters out every month, always showing some sad-looking faces. Been like that for the past 5 years. Emily Carter, a girl who went missing when she was 19. Her family searched everywhere, and social media blew up with the news. Plus, the cops found a bunch of old papers covering the walls in that room. Newspaper clippings about Emily's disappearance, old photos of her from years back, even letters she'd sent to her friends that someone had been holding on to. In the days after, the cops started digging deeper to figure out who kept Emily locked up in that dark basement room for the past 5 years. At first, they thought it might be this middle-aged guy who used to live in the building, some weird, lonely dude no one in the neighborhood really paid attention to. But the investigation uncovered something even more terrifying. George Miller, The building owner, the guy everyone knew. He seemed like a nice dude, always checking the pipes, collecting rent, helping old folks carry their groceries upstairs. No one would have guessed that right beneath us, in that dark basement, George had created a living nightmare. He didn't use force to make Emily disappear. He didn't snatch her off the street in broad daylight or break into her room at night. He used trust. That day, Emily was heading home from college when it started pouring. He happened to drive by and offered her a ride back to her apartment. Why would she have any reason to doubt him? But when his car stopped, Emily never got the chance to get out. He had it all planned out. A room in the basement, door locked tight, walls sealed. He didn't want to kill her or hurt her. He wanted to keep her forever. But George couldn't control Emily's mind. 5 years went by, and she remembered every quiet moment, every sound from outside. Her strength got her freedom and put George behind bars, where he belonged. Emily's family took her somewhere new to start over. Me and my grandma packed up and left too. It haunted me, knowing I lived right above the room where Emily was trapped all those years. The thing I had feared and avoided for so long wasn't some monster. It was a girl who had suffered more than anyone should. I am Marie, 28 years old, and I have been living alone in the city of Fresno for nearly 8 years. I never thought that working at the bakery counter in a Walmart supermarket could turn into a lifelong obsession. I had been working here for over 3 years, starting every day early in the morning when the store was still quiet. It was a routine job with flour, ovens, the delicious smell of fresh bread, and brief conversations with co-workers. Everything changed the day Gim Arcour disappeared. Jim was a young girl. She was beautiful, quick-witted, always volunteered for the night shift, and was ready to work extra hours at any time. No one at the bakery worked harder than Jim. She once said she needed money to help her family, that she couldn't afford to fail. She was always on time, never missed a day without notice. And yet one morning, she didn't show up for her shift. At first, everyone thought maybe Jim was sick or had an urgent matter to deal with. But when the manager called and no one answered, a strange feeling began to creep in. I remember last week she seemed more stressed than usual. When we were cleaning up after our shift, Jim confided in me about a problem that had been worrying her. "Marie," she whispered, still wiping down the oven, "I think someone is trying to hurt me." I stopped mid-action and looked at her in surprise. "What do you mean?" "I'm not sure," Jim sighed. "But Brad always looks at me with these strange eyes. Last week I found my locker had been broken into, and yesterday I saw him hanging around, even though it wasn't his shift." Brad was the night shift manager, a middle-aged man who was quiet with a cold stare. He had only started working here a few months ago. I nervously told Jim to report it to the manager. Jim shook her head helplessly since Brad was the manager, and she had no concrete evidence. I placed my hand on her shoulder to comfort her. "If there's anything that makes you feel unsafe, tell me, okay?" Jim smiled weakly and nodded. "Thanks. Maybe I'm just overthinking." Nearly a week after the incident, no one knew where Gim had gone. Her family had no news either. The police were called in. They questioned all the staff, searched for information, but there were no traces to be found. A few days after Gim's disappearance, life seemed to go back to normal, or at least, people tried to make themselves believe that. I still went to work every day, still spread dough on trays, still heard the oven crackling as if nothing had happened. Everything became eerily silent, as if no one dared to mention Gim's name. We kept working, but the worry lingered in every glance. I couldn't help but notice that Brad seemed unnervingly calm after Jim disappeared. While all of us were tense and worried, he remained composed, as if nothing had happened. Sometimes I even caught him smiling to himself while checking the oven, the one Gim used to handle. Then, that morning, the first nightmare began. A middle-aged woman stormed up to the bakery counter, her face flushed with anger. She slammed a bag of bread onto the counter, her voice sharp with frustration. "Do you know what's in here?" I slowly looked down at the bag of bread. On the outside, it looked like any other baguette, golden brown, still giving off that familiar, fragrant baked smell. But when the woman tore open the bread, inside was a dark patch, and before I could process it, the customer pulled out a long brown hair. I heard murmurs from the people around us. The noise rose, as if a crowd was about to burst into chaos. The manager quickly rushed over, forcing a tight smile in an attempt to calm the customer. He hurriedly tried to come up with an explanation. "Sorry, ma'am, this is definitely an accident. We'll check the baking process to make sure this doesn't happen again." I just stood there trembling, my mind spinning with one thought. The hair, it looked so much like Jim's. That evening, I sat curled up on the old couch, a thin blanket draped over my shoulders. The TV buzzed in the quiet room, filling the emptiness of a lonely night after a long shift. I held a cup of water, taking small sips to ease the fatigue building in my body. Today had been long. I tried to push aside the swirling thoughts about Jim, the hair and the bread, the strange feelings that had been haunting me these past few days. But then, a news headline jolted me back to reality. Fresno police are investigating a horrifying incident. A customer at Walmart discovered a human finger in a loaf of bread purchased from the store's bakery. The cup in my hand slipped, the glass hitting the floor with a crash, the water spilling onto the carpet. My whole body froze, my eyes glued to the TV screen. Currently, DNA tests are underway to identify the victim. I gasped, my cold hands gripping the arm of the chair. The finger. It couldn't be. A wave of disgust surged from deep within me, making me want to vomit. I tried to find a reasonable explanation. Could it have been an accident? A sick joke from someone? An unusual mishap in production? But no scenario made sense. Because I had touched those loaves, I had packaged them with these hands. I had placed them on the shelf to sell, neatly, cleanly, at a ridiculously low price. And now, a part of someone's body had been in it. A piece of someone had been crushed, mixed into the dough, baked golden in the industrial oven, and then wrapped up in a clean plastic bag. Guilt welled up in my chest, choking me. Was I an accomplice? I had touched it. I had placed it on the shelf, unknowingly inviting customers to buy that disgusting thing. I tossed and turned in bed, rolling from side to side, unable to shake the horrific images from my head. The finger in the bread, the hair tangled in the soft filling, the oven that had been running all night. Eventually, exhaustion pulled me into darkness, but it wasn't peace. I found myself standing in the Walmart bakery. Everything was unnervingly silent. There were no machines running, no workers chatting, no bread puffing up in the oven. No more buttery smells, no more warmth from the fresh-baked trays. I slowly walked forward, each step echoing in the empty space. The silence felt unnatural, as if the whole world had stopped. Then, my gaze stopped at the industrial oven. I didn't understand why I felt scared, but an uneasy feeling began to spread through my body. Suddenly, something started to ooze from the oven's door. A thick, dark liquid slowly dripped down onto the white-tiled floor, creating long, winding streaks. I stared at it, trying to reassure myself that it was just strawberry jam, that maybe someone had spilled an ingredient. But then the foul, metallic smell hit me. I gasped for air, feeling my body freeze, my heart pounding so hard I thought it might burst from my chest. I wanted to look away, to run, but some invisible force kept me rooted to the spot. The oven door slowly opened. Inside, amid the charred metal and ash, was Jim. Her body was burned, with patches of skin peeling away to reveal the charred flesh beneath. Her hair was no longer soft, only scorched clumps sticking to her distorted face. Her eyes were wide open, staring straight at me. Her mouth hung open, as if trying to scream. I stepped back, but she began to move. Jim lifted her arm, blackened and ulcerated, pointing directly at me. I wanted to scream, to run, but I couldn't. Then her voice echoed, not through sound, but through a whisper that reverberated in my mind. I'm still here. I jolted awake, drenched in sweat, my breath rapid as if I had been submerged underwater. I woke up with dark circles under my eyes and my body exhausted after almost no sleep. My stomach twisted as I remembered the horrific nightmare. Jim in the oven, her burned body, her eyes staring at me. But I reassured myself that it was just a dream. A crazy dream brought on by my mind, haunted by Jim's disappearance and the terrifying news last night. I didn't even dare to check my phone or turn on the TV. I didn't want to hear any more news. When I entered Walmart, the atmosphere was eerily strange. People were gathered in small groups, whispering to each other, their faces all marked with a sense of shock. My heart pounded heavily, each beat hard to breathe with. A bad feeling crept into my cells. Then, I heard a sentence that made my whole world crumble. The police have confirmed, it's Jim. My legs felt weak. I leaned against the bakery counter to steady myself, but the dizziness in my head didn't fade. The finger in the bread, it was Jim's. The air in the supermarket seemed to thicken, making it hard to breathe. Everything in the bakery, trays, flour, freshly baked loaves, all twisted in my eyes. The industrial oven was dismantled shortly after. Walmart closed for several weeks for the investigation, but no one knew the true story. A part of me wanted to believe it was just a terrible mistake, that no one could be cruel enough to do something like that. But the rest of me couldn't believe it. I no longer work at Walmart. Every time I step into a supermarket, every time I see a fresh loaf of bread, I hear Jim. Not a nightmare, not a hallucination, but a haunting whisper that echoes from the deepest parts of my mind. I'm still here. Almost a year has passed since that horrific day. I moved to another city, started a new job at a small bakery, trying to rebuild my life. But the memories of Jim, of Walmart, of those horrifying loaves of bread, still cling to me. I can't stop thinking about Brad, the man with the cold eyes and strange behavior. After the incident, he disappeared too. The police questioned all the staff, including Brad, but there was not enough evidence to charge anyone. But I know. Deep down, I know something is wrong with Brad. Jim's warning about him following her, the strange look when the hair was found in the bread, and his sudden disappearance after the incident, everything is just too coincidental. Was Jim's case really an accident, or was it a crime too cleverly concealed?
I am Maya, 18 years old, a gymnast currently enrolled in the advanced training program at the University of Texas at Austin. My dream is to shine on the international stage, achieving great accomplishments to showcase my talent and determination. My friends and I go through intense study and training sessions, spending most of our time in class and then returning to the dorms to rest. Sometimes I visit my family on the weekends. My dorm room has 4 people, all of whom are in the same class, and I am closest to Nicole. Is this the workout outfit you just bought on Amazon? Isn't it beautiful? That's pretty awesome. I think I've gained a little weight. Don't invite me to late night snacks anymore. Those are some casual chats between Nicole and me on the way to that fateful afternoon training session. We will be taught a new move, the vault. When we entered the class, the coach was already waiting for us, Coach Mandy, a very strict and tough coach. But I really enjoy her classes, and it was Coach Mandy who gave me a lot of strength to overcome the difficult phases in pursuing this sport. Pay attention, everyone. The vault is one of the main events in gymnastics and requires athletes to have strength, speed, and precise technique. In the vault, The athlete performs a series of quick movements, starting with a run-up, a jump onto the vaulting horse, and executes aerial moves before landing on the mat. Wait a minute. The landing mat. Suddenly, Coach Mandy stopped her lecture, muttering to herself as she walked toward the landing mat. The sound of the zipper on the mat was pulled tightly, and all of us turned our gaze toward her in silence. All right, let's start the training session. Coach Mandy demonstrated to show us the process and the techniques required to perform the vault. Indeed, she was a coach who had won international gold medals. Every move she made left us mesmerized. We applauded in admiration for our coach. Maya, she called my name. You're first. I was a little nervous, took a deep breath, and then executed a smooth and precise run-up, jumped onto the vaulting horse, and performed the aerial moves. However, when I landed on the mat, I could clearly feel the wobble from the mat, and I fell. Coach Mandy looked at me and smiled gently. It's okay. I believe you'll do better next time. Devlin, you're next. Coach Mandy called Devlin, a friend of mine with excellent technique. However, Devlin also landed quite awkwardly, surprising the entire class. Coach Mandy still kept her smile, not commenting on anyone's technique, and called each of the 15 people in the class to take their turn. This kept happening repeatedly, and each person had jumped for the 7th time. Indeed, with each attempt, our technique became more stable, and we got more accustomed to the mat. You're doing great, Coach Mandy smiled and clapped. We also clapped along with her, feeling quite uplifted by the praise from our coach. Suddenly, Nicole shouted loudly, startling me as I stood next to her. Blood! Nicole stammered, pointing towards the training mat. There was indeed blood, a lot of it, soaking a large area of the mat. We were all in shock, and one of the girls fainted from fear. Coach Mandy asked a few of the boys in the class to take the fainted girl to the school's infirmary, while the rest of us quickly returned to the dorms to rest, and the class ended early. Only a few of the boys quickly followed her instructions, while Nicole, the others, and I remained standing frozen on the ground. Don't you hear what I'm saying? Coach Mandy's voice made Nicole and a few others burst into tears. Nicole hurriedly grabbed my hand and led me away. Back in the room, we were confused and discussed a lot about the strange occurrence that had just happened. It'll be fine. I don't think it's anything serious, I reassured my friends, though in reality, I was extremely confused. The image of the blood-soaked mat haunted me and my classmates, but we all remained silent. Our focus on studying declined due to the confusion, worry, and a sense of foreboding and something bad about to happen. Every night, Nicole would have nightmares. She would talk in her sleep, cry, or even scream. Nicole's parents had requested permission for her to take a few days off from school to go home and rest. The constant tension weighed on us, leaving us feeling heavy and exhausted. In the following days, when we went to the class on nutrition and health, we didn't see Mr. Joyce teaching. According to some rumors at school, Mr. Joyce had been missing for almost a week for unknown reasons. Another training session with Coach Mandy took place, according to the schedule. Suddenly, the police appeared during the class, handcuffed Coach Mandy, and led her away, leaving all of us in shock. In the equipment storage, the police found the training mat from that day piled up in a corner. They pulled the zipper and opened it. Inside the training mat was Mr. Joyce with a twisted and crumpled body, smelling horribly. His despicable behavior of peeping on female students is unacceptable. I let the victims directly punish that pervert. These were the words Coach Mandy confidently declared in court. We were deeply shocked by Mr. Joyce's true nature, and even more terrified when we remembered that training session. Nicole and Devlin dropped out of school due to the overwhelming psychological shock. Coach Manny was sentenced to life in prison and could be granted parole after serving 15 years.